All those wonderful years, so long ago, when Ralph and I were growing up, 203 North Park Street was a warm haven with books and music and loving care. It was a pretty, square white house with a little colonial red brick porch with 2 high-backed white wooden benches. Here, Ralph and I carried out many projects, mostly of the imagination. Ours was a small world at that time, of simple pleasures, not the least of which were the changing seasons. We were fascinated with the roaring thunder and the flash of lightning, the sound of rain, and the wind waving the tops of trees. In the spring, the Wisconsin was running again, under the Park Street Bridge and swirling around the small islands. Pink blossoms were unfolding on our apple tree. In the fall, there would be those marvelous apples, tart yet sweet. No apples have ever tasted like those. As the days grew longer, we roller skated around the block and up Park Street and played outside with neighbors. If there was an especially beautiful sunset, we'd call Grandma Bosch so she wouldn't miss it. In April 1910, Halley's Comet appeared in the west. We'd go out in the front yard each evening and gaze at this fascinating ball of light with its sparkling tail. Dad told us it appears every 76 years. It is returning in 1986. I do hope I see it again. Dad also told us about the Earth tilting on its axis, and about gravity and the stars and other phenomena. Dad was a civil engineer by profession, with a degree from Valparaiso University. Mother and Dad were married in 1899. The first year of their marriage, Dad worked for Grandpa Henry Clay Mead at his lumber mill in Upper Michigan. In the summer, Mother and Dad lived with Grandma and Grandpa on their houseboat on the international waters between Canada and Minnesota. That winter, they lived in a little town named Tower. In 1900, Mother and Dad moved back to Merrill, where Dad opened Mead's Book and Music Store at 910 East Main Street. I was born in 1901. Ralph was born in 1904. We lived in an apartment above the store until 1909. Lights were electric, and the furnace burned wood, which farmers hauled into town on their sleighs. In 1909, we moved into our home on Park Street. Mother helped at the store at busy times. I was thrilled to help down there too. At special times, like the holiday season, I remember the special gifts we sold: a Chinese abacus, a beautiful Japanese doll, and some tiny rolls of paper that, when put in a bowl of water, unfolded into flowers. Mother read to us the poems of Robert Louis Stevenson and Eugene Field, which we loved. She and Dad also read the classics to us. Our favorite was Coco and the King's Children. Ralph also read Coco to his children, and he recorded and illustrated the novel for his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Holidays were something apart from other days. On Thanksgiving, Ralph and I always hoped for snow, kept checking for if there was enough. Grandpa Mead would pick us up with his horses and sleigh. We would sing as we rode in the sleigh. Ralph and I painted place cards of the Pilgrim Fathers, turkeys, and pumpkins. We loved Grandma Mead's delicious dinners. Grandma's family was Pennsylvania Dutch. Her maiden name was Elizabeth Mellinger. Grandpa called her Libby. Dad's sister Theda played the piano and sang after dinner. Aunt Theda was a trained nurse. She had been the superintendent of St. Luke's Hospital in Marquette, Michigan, and she was the first county nurse in Wisconsin. Aunt Theda dedicated her adult life to helping the sick and even took patients into her home when the hospital was overcrowded. She died when she was only 44. She was engaged to be married the year she died. On Christmas Eve, we performed in programs at our church. We loved the crunch of the snow under our boots as we walked over the sparkling snow on our way to our church. On Christmas Day, all our relatives came to our home for dinner. We played Christmas songs on the Victrola during the day, and on Christmas evening, Mother played the piano. Plays after dinner on Christmas were one of our special projects. Of course, we planned the words, the action, costumes, background music, and were the actors for a most appreciative audience: Mother, Dad, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. In one of these plays, I was a fairy princess in a silver cloth costume designed by Ralph. He also made my magic wand, a small stick wound in silver ribbon to cover a thin electric wire with a flashlight bulb at the top. I controlled it with a small battery in my hand. My favorite gift through the years was Doris, my doll. I'm so glad that Ralph painted a portrait of her. On New Year's Day, we went to Grandma Bosch's. We loved the big white house with a central hall and 2 fireplaces. Grandma always had some little songs to sing and stories to tell us. When we sat around the fire, she'd say that the sunlight the tree had absorbed during its life was now coming out. We loved the table with the sparkling glass, and especially her surprise in the cellar, homemade ice cream. Grandma Bosch was born in Westphalia in Germany in 1856. Her maiden name was Lisetta Taki. Her father's name was Frederick Taki. Her mother was Christina Stouffer. The Takis came to America on the ship America when Lisetta was 7 years old. Her 3 sisters and some of her 10 stepsisters and brothers also came at that time. The Takis lived in Elkader, Iowa. Lisetta had bright auburn hair in those days, and her father called her his golden girl. In 1874, when Lisetta was 18, she married Fred Bosch. Fred Bosch was born in Württemberg, Germany, in 1851. Fred was only an infant when he came to America with his parents, Andrew and Anna Bosch. Andrew Bosch owned large tracts of land in Wisconsin, and he was also a published poet and a businessman. Mother, Wilhelmina Minnie Bosch, later known as Da, was born in Elkader, Iowa in 1878. When Mother was 2, they moved to Merrill. The Bosch family owned extensive property in Wisconsin, including land in Merrill. Lisetta, Grandma Bosch, opened a deluxe restaurant and ice cream parlor at 910 East Main Street, which later became the Mead store. Fred Bosch traveled for various companies and left Lisetta for another woman in 1892. This photo was taken shortly before their separation. In the top row are Andrew Bosch, Lisetta, and Fred Bosch. In the bottom row, Mother, Aunt Jo, and Thasnelda, Fred's stepsister. Mother was 14 when her father left. I don't know if her father ever came back to see her, but Mother always wrote to him. In the summertime, we put on circuses in the yard. I was Careless Cecilia, the aerialist on our swing, and Ralph was the ringmaster. We shaved Don, our collie, to look like a lion. I don't think he liked it, but he humored us, and his coat soon grew back. Ralph and I were fascinated by trains, especially if we could go on the Pullman at night. We loved looking through the windows as we sped through the little towns with the dimly lit streets. One time we went to Minneapolis and saw Maud Adams. There was a beautiful azure sky through one of the stage windows, which Ralph and I always called Maud Adams Blue. We liked to visit Mother's aunts and cousins in Elkader, Iowa. I remember a stagecoach we took that had a fringe on top. Ralph and I watched the wheels turning through the deep sands of those roads. Our first car was a Chevrolet, which Ralph and I named Pegasus. Later, Father refitted Pegasus to use it as a truck for delivering his appliances. We loved taking trips in our car. One trip was to Lake Itasca. Grandpa Mead had once owned all the land around Lake Itasca, which is the headwaters of the Mississippi. Later, he had to sell his land to the government for the Lake Itasca State Park. Here, Ralph and I waded across the Mississippi. Both Ralph and I attended the University of Wisconsin. I graduated in 1923 with a degree in journalism. Ralph was president and artistic director of the University of Wisconsin Players. He went on to graduate from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. Ralph's play Band Concert was produced in New York, and the critics said he would be an important American playwright. In 1928, Ralph directed and produced Polly with a Past in Merrill. I was Polly. Each night we packed the house. People said Ralph's productions were as good as any they'd ever seen in New York or Chicago, which they surely were. It was such fun working again with Ralph on his projects, and to be in his reflected glory. Billy Mead Taylor, February 19, 1984.